Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to give you that essential guide, sort of a shortcut through the noise of the global news landscape.
It's definitely noisy out there.
Right. So this deep dive, it's our mission control, really.
Yeah.
We're pulling together threads from, well, everywhere.
Right.
Science, space, diplomacy, the economy.
And it's quite a stack this week. We've got sources showing just incredible acceleration, across almost every field you can imagine.
Feels like that.
And our job, as always, isn't just to list things off. It's to, synthesize them, connect the dots. Because when you see something like a breakthrough in brain science next to, say, new resource nationalism policies, you realize these things are connected. The boundaries are shifting everywhere. So we're digging into the what, sure, but also the why. Why is this collection of events matter right now globally?
Exactly. So today, we've got a huge range. Real breakthroughs in biology, big moves in space exploration, some pretty stark warnings about the planet's health, and of course, the geopolitical heat coming off the United Nations General Assembly, the UNGA. It's been quite the session.
It certainly has. So where do we start? Maybe with something fundamental. What's happening inside us, our bodies, our brains?
Perfect. Let's jump right into science, specifically brain science and biology. Okay, first up, something genuinely positive, a real win, I think, in the fight against those devastating neurodegenerative diseases, specifically Huntington's.
This is huge news, yes. And it's huge mostly because of how they did it. It's a small study, granted out of the UK with the biotech firm Uniquare, but they've reported the first successful gene therapy treatment for Huntington's. And the numbers are, well, frankly remarkable. A 75% reduction in disease progression.
75%? I mean, that's just transformative, isn't it? It goes way beyond just managing symptoms.
Absolutely. It's about hitting the root cause.
So the gene therapy approach itself, that's the critical piece here for other conditions, too.
That's exactly it. Huntington's is caused by the specific dominant gene mutation, right? It leads to nerve cells breaking down over time. Gene therapy lets scientists go right in, maybe silence the bad gene, maybe insert a working copy.
Intervening directly.
And achieving a 75% slowdown. That suggests we might actually be able to halt, or at least drastically delay, processes we used to think were unstoppable.
Wow.
It gives a massive confidence boost, especially for the delivery systems, Getting these therapies past the blood-brain barrier is notoriously tricky. This success suggests those methods are maturing.
So potential hope down the line for things like Parkinson's, ALS.
It opens that door much wider, yes. It suggests the platform technology is getting there.
That's incredibly hopeful. And speaking of rewriting the rule book, there's also a big shift happening in how we understand Alzheimer's disease.
Yes, another potential paradigm shift. For what, over 100 years? Since 1906.
Right, since Alice Alzheimer first described it.
The focus has been almost entirely on protein plaques, amyloid plaques, and tangles in the brain.
The usual suspects.
The usual suspects. But now, research from Purdue University is suggesting maybe we've been focusing on the wrong thing, or at least not the whole picture.
Okay, so what are they looking at instead?
Fats, lipids. Specifically, fat accumulation inside the brain's immune cells. These are called microglia.
Microglia. Remind us what they do.
Think of them as the brain's cleanup crew. They're supposed to clear out debris, fight inflammation, keep things tidy.
Okay, the garbage collectors of the brain. So what happens if they get clogged up with fat?
Well, just like a clogged filter, they stop working properly. The research suggests that when these microglia are choked with fat, they just can't effectively clean up the toxic mess associated with Alzheimer's.
Ah, okay. So the traditional approach was trying to stop the production of the mess itself, the plaques.
Exactly. Reduce the amyloid.
But this new idea is unclog the cleanup crew.
Precisely. Target the fat removal. Clear the filter, like you said. The idea is to boost the brain's own defense and cleanup mechanisms. It shifts the focus from, say, an external enemy like the plaque to an internal system failure. The immune system getting overwhelmed or gummed up.
An internal failure idea? That really clicks. It feels like a more holistic view.
It could be. It opens up entirely new therapeutic angles if it holds up.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, before we launch into space, one more finding about something deeply fundamental. Sleep. And this one sounds almost sci-fi.
It is genuinely mind-bending, this one, because it messes with our neat categories, Brain stuff here, gut stuff over there.
Right.
This new research indicates that sleep isn't just driven by the brain. Our microbiome, the bacteria living in us, they're involved too.
Okay, wait. Our gut bacteria are influencing our sleep cycles. How?
Through specific bacterial molecules, the key one they identified is called peptidoglycan.
Peptidoglycan. Okay, break that down. What is it, and why is it showing up in our sleep regulation?
So peptidoglycan is basically a building block. It's part of the cell wall for most bacteria, including the ones happily living in our gut.
Right.
And what the researchers found is that the levels of this bacterial molecule in the brain actually fluctuate naturally, in sync with our sleep-wake cycles, our circadian rhythms.
You're kidding. So the bacteria are literally sending signals that affect our brain's sleep patterns.
That's what the evidence strongly suggests. These molecules produced by the bacteria seem to be acting as signals that influence neurological functions related to sleep.
So could it be like the bacteria's activity level, maybe based on when we eat, sends signals saying, okay, all quiet, time to rest, or activity detected, time to be alert?
That's the thinking. It points to a really deep evolutionary connection. Maybe early organisms co-evolved with their bacteria, and this signaling system became integrated into regulating rest and activity.
Wow.
And think about the implications. If this holds, maybe we could treat sleep disorders not just with brain-targeting drugs, but by managing the gut, modifying the microbiome, or these bacterial signals.
That's a whole new frontier for sleep medicine. And just makes you realize how, well, interconnected everything is. We're not just individuals, we're ecosystems.
We really are, which is maybe a good bridge to thinking about our connection to the wider cosmos.
Perfect transition. Let's talk space exploration. Okay, space. The Artemis program, NASA's big pushback to the moon, seems to be gathering steam. Artemis 3, the landing mission planned for 2025, feels more real now with progress on Artemis 2.
Definitely. The 4 astronauts assigned to Artemis 2, that's the mission that will actually fly around the moon first.
The big test flight.
Exactly. They're expressing a lot of confidence. This mission is all about checking the systems, the Orion capsule's life support, navigation, and critically, that heat shield for re-entry. It's about proving the mission integrity before they commit to a landing.
Makes sense. Test drive it before you try to park it.
Something like that. And it's the first time humans will have gone that far out since the Apollo days.
Which is pretty amazing in itself. And I love that NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, is really bringing the public along for the ride with citizen science projects.
Yeah, the Lunar Melt Initiative is a great example. They're asking regular people, citizen scientists, to help map features on the moon using images from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter.
What kind of features?
Specifically, impact melt flow deposits. Basically, areas where asteroid impacts melted the rock and it flowed like lava. Volunteers are marking rocks, measuring boulders, outlining these flows.
So crowdsourcing lunar geology.
Essentially, yes. And all that data helps scientists build better models of the moon's history, its surface, which is crucial for planning future missions, like where to land Artemis 3.
Very cool. Okay, let's zoom out, way out. To the scale of supermassive black holes, there's new thinking on just how massive they actually are.
Right. This involves looking at quasars, those incredibly bright objects powered by supermassive black holes feeding at the centers of distant galaxies. New observations of one distant quasar suggest that these giants might be, well, less giant than we thought, maybe up to 10% less massive. So think around 1 billion times the mass of our sun, instead of significantly more.
1 billion suns is still pretty big. But why does this 10% difference matter?
It matters because it helps solve a major cosmic puzzle. How did these things get so enormous so early in the universe's history? According to previous models, there just wasn't enough time for them to gobble up that much matter.
The impossible early black holes problem.
Exactly. They seemed paradoxically mature for their age. This new research suggests a kind of self-regulation mechanism. Professor Seb Honig used a brilliant analogy for it.
Oh, yeah.
He called it the cosmic hairdryer.
Slight chuckle. The cosmic hairdryer. Okay, explain.
Imagine the black hole feeding. As matter swirls in through the accretion disk, it heats up incredibly, releasing enormous amounts of radiation. This intense radiation pressure literally acts like a hairdryer, blowing gas and dust away from the black hole.
So it pushes its own food away.
Precisely. It limits how fast the black hole can actually consume matter. It puts the brakes on its own growth.
So they don't just grow unchecked. There's a natural limit based on their own output.
That seems to be the idea. And it means the black holes we see in the early universe aren't impossibly big after all. They were just growing within limits we didn't fully appreciate before.
Makes the universe feel a little less chaotic, maybe. Still mind-bogglingly vast, though. And speaking of vastness, maybe a bit lonely. There's a SETI study suggesting advanced neighbors might be very, very far away.
Yeah, SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, their latest estimates are quite sobering. They figure the nearest technologically advanced civilization, if one exists, could be as far as 33,000 light years away.
33,000 light years. That's
Yeah.
effectively unreachable for us right now.
Pretty much. It reinforces that idea of the Great Filter. Somewhere along the line, from simple life to spacefaring civilization, there are incredibly hard steps, making advanced life potentially very rare. We might be quite isolated.
A humbling thought. Okay, back closer to home, or at least closer to Mars. The logistics of getting stuff into space are changing fast, aren't they? We're seeing private companies taking on bigger roles.
Absolutely. A key example just happened. NASA's twin Mars spacecraft, part of the ESCAPADE mission, have arrived in Florida. And they're set to launch not on a traditional NASA rocket, but on Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket.
Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company.
That's the one. Using their powerful New Glenn is a huge vote of confidence in commercial launch providers becoming the go-to for major interplanetary missions, at least the uncrewed ones for now.
It's like space exploration is shifting from a government monopoly to a public-private partnership.
Very much so. And supporting all this, you see contracts like the one General Dynamics Information Technology, just one from NASA, over $163 million to improve atmospheric science modeling. That's crucial for planning missions, both on Earth and eventually Mars.
It all ties together. The science, the tech, the logistics. Okay, that focus on atmospheric science feels like a natural, if maybe slightly ominous, pivot back to our own planet's atmosphere and oceans.
Ominous is perhaps the right word for this next item. We need to talk about climate and planetary boundaries.
Right. There's a stark warning from the scientific community about the health of our oceans. We seem to have crossed a really dangerous line.
This report from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, or PIK, is deeply concerning. Their finding is blunt. The planetary boundary for ocean acidification has been breached for the first time.
Okay, planetary boundary. Let's define that. What does it mean in this context?
Think of planetary boundaries as the guardrails for Earth's life support systems. PIK identified 9 critical processes, things like climate change, biodiversity loss, freshwater use, and ocean acidification.
And crossing a boundary means?
It means we're pushing that specific Earth system outside the stable, predictable range that allowed human civilization to flourish over the last 10,000 years or so, the Holocene epoch. We're entering uncharted territory.
And for ocean acidification, the cause is clear, right? It's CO2.
Directly. All the carbon dioxide we pump out from burning fossil fuels, plus deforestation reducing the planet's ability to absorb it. A lot of that CO2 ends up dissolving in the ocean.
Where it forms carbonic acid. Basic chemistry.
Basic, but with devastating consequences. The increased acidity makes it harder for shell-building organisms to survive. We're talking about tiny creatures like pteropods, sea butterflies, which are fundamental to the marine food web.
And coral reefs, obviously.
And coral reefs, the rainforests of the sea, they're incredibly sensitive to pH changes. The fact that this is now the 7th out of 9 boundaries that PIK says we've officially crossed, well, it paints a picture of severe systemic stress on the planet.
7 out of 9. That puts enormous pressure on global leaders. And amidst that pressure, we did get a significant commitment from China, the world's biggest emitter.
Yes, this was notable. China announced its first firm national target for reducing carbon emissions intensity. They're not absolute emissions yet. The scale is ambitious. They aim to expand their wind and solar power capacity 6-fold compared to 2020 levels by the year 2035.
6-fold? That sounds massive.
It is a huge industrial undertaking. They also plan to increase the share of non-fossil fuels in their total energy consumption to over 30% by then.
Okay, so that's the commitment. But what's the balance take? Is it actually enough?
That's the debate. It definitely signals China's seriousness about leading in green tech and securing its own energy future. But most climate experts look at the numbers and say, it's good, but it's still not enough.
Not enough to meet the big international goals.
Right, not enough to align with keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Under this plan, China's overall emissions might still rise for a while before peaking, and critics say that peak needs to happen sooner and be lower.
And there was some political framing around this, too.
Oh, yes. President Xi Jinping, while announcing this, also took a veiled swipe at developed nations, including the U.S., accusing some of retreating from their climate commitments. So it's partly a genuine policy shift, partly diplomatic positioning.
That back and forth really highlights why the next big climate summit, COP30, is so vital.
Absolutely critical. The big goal for COP30 is to deliver a really strong cover decision. That's the main political outcome document that actually closes the so-called ambition gap.
The ambition gap. Explain that simply.
It's the difference between what countries have pledged to do in their national climate plans, their NDCs, or nationally determined contributions, and what the science says needs to be done globally to hit that 1.5-degree target.
And right now, there's still a big gap between promises and necessities.
A dangerously large gap. COP30 is seen as maybe the last major chance to significantly narrow that gap before the next formal review cycle. The pressure is immense.
Okay, let's shift from global policy to a very tangible climate impact. Wildfires, especially in North America. There's a heated debate in the U.S. about how to manage forests.
Yeah, this is a classic environmental policy battleground. There are proposals gaining traction in Congress and some agencies to significantly increase timber harvesting in U.S. national forests.
The argument being that logging reduces fire fuel.
That's the proponents' argument. They say strategic logging, thinning dense stands, removing underbrush, it makes forests healthier, more resilient, and crucially, less prone to exploding into uncontrollable megafires. Healthier forests, lower risk.
Makes intuitive sense. But what's the counter-argument? Critics are worried.
Critics see it as potentially a smokescreen for increased commercial logging. They worry that, especially if environmental reviews and public oversight are weakened, it could lead to unsustainable practices.
Like taking out the biggest, oldest trees.
Exactly. Removing large, often more fire-resistant trees, disturbing soils, reducing carbon storage. They argue it could actually worsen the ecological problems in the long run, all under the banner of fire prevention. It's a fight over what forest health actually means and who benefits.
And the fires themselves are causing international friction, right, between the U.S. and Canada.
Yes, there's been a noticeable blame game dynamic over wildfire smoke crossing the border. Some U.S. officials have publicly expressed frustration, implying Canada isn't doing enough to prevent fires whose smoke drifts south.
But experts are pushing back on that framing.
Strongly. Climate scientists and policy experts point out that blaming Canada is far too simplistic. The root cause is climate change, making both countries hotter and drier, creating conditions ripe for massive fires on both sides of the border.
So finger-pointing misses the point.
Completely. They argue the focus needs to be on mandatory, cooperative, cross-border strategies, sharing firefighting resources, coordinating fuel management, and long-term adaptation planning for the reality of a warmer North America.
Makes sense. Now, amidst these challenges, technology is offering some help, particularly for agriculture dealing with climate shifts.
Yes. Artificial intelligence, AI, is really emerging as a powerful tool here. AI-driven weather forecasting is being called a game changer for farmers worldwide.
How so? Better than the usual weather forecast?
Much more specific and predictive. It goes beyond general regional forecasts. AI systems can analyze hyperlocal data, soil moisture, past weather patterns, real-time satellite images to give farmers incredibly tailored advice.
Like exactly when to plant a specific field.
Or how much irrigation is needed, minimizing water waste. Or predicting the likelihood of a sudden hailstorm or frost event, giving them time to prepare. It's about optimizing decisions at a very fine-grained level.
Which must be invaluable for maximizing yields and managing risk in this volatile climate.
Hugely important for food security, globally.
Okay, from the climate frying pan into the geopolitical fire. Let's talk about the UN General Assembly and the major international tensions on display there. The UNGA this year felt particularly charged, especially regarding the Middle East. Iran's president took a very strong stance.
Extremely strong. President Masoud Pezeshkian's address was headline news. He launched a blistering attack on Israel, specifically condemning any ambition for a greater Israel, calling it a ludicrous and delusional scheme.
Strong words on the world stage.
Very. And in the same speech, he was equally emphatic that Iran will never seek to build a nuclear bomb. It was a dual message. Defiance against a regional rival, coupled with assertions of peaceful nuclear intentions.
That's a difficult line to walk. How was that received, particularly by Western powers?
With extreme skepticism and immediate pressure, French President Emmanuel Macron's reaction was swift and sharp. He essentially put Tehran on the clock.
What did he say?
He warned Pezeshkian publicly that Iran had only hours left to take concrete, verifiable steps towards de-escalation on the nuclear front or face the reimposition of severe international sanctions. The diplomatic patience seems worn very thin.
Hours left. That's intense pressure. Meanwhile, the actual conflict in Gaza continues to escalate tragically.
The situation on the ground is dire. Reports indicate Israeli military operations are intensifying near the center of Gaza City. Hamas is reportedly digging in, preparing for brutal street-to-street fighting as Israeli forces push deeper.
And the human cost.
Catastrophic. Recent Israeli strikes were reported to have killed at least 85 people. This includes a particularly devastating strike on the Al-Ali Stadium complex, where 12 people seeking shelter were killed.
A stadium being used as shelter.
Yes. And the UN OCHA, that's the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, that's sounding the alarm, they report intensified assaults targeting known tent encampments and civilian infrastructure. People are literally sleeping out in the open amongst the rubble because designated shelters aren't safe.
Just horrific. And the instability is spreading regionally, isn't it? We saw that drone attack on Eilat in Israel.
That was a very serious escalation, yes. A drone reportedly launched from Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen managed to evade defenses and strike the southern Israeli coastal city of Eilat.
And there were casualties.
At least 20 people injured, 2 of them seriously. It highlights 2 things. The increasing sophistication and range of drones used by non-state actors like the Houthis, and how the Gaza conflict is actively pulling in regional players and escalating tensions far beyond Gaza's borders. Proxy warfare is in full swing.
Amidst all this conflict, there was a somewhat unexpected diplomatic moment at the UNGA involving Syria.
Quite unexpected and historic in its own way. Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa addressed the General Assembly. It was the first time a Syrian leader had done so in nearly 60 years.
60 years? Why now?
He framed it as Syria's return to the international community. He was explicitly asking for international support to help stabilize the country, rebuild infrastructure damaged by years of civil war and ongoing Israeli strikes, and essentially normalize relations. It's a major diplomatic outreach from Syria's new leadership.
Interesting. And staying with diplomacy, U.S. President Donald Trump also waded in with a specific plan for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yes, President Trump engaged directly with Arab and Muslim leaders during UNGA week. He presented them with what's being called a detailed 21-point plan aimed at resolving the conflict.
21 points. Any key takeaways from that?
The most significant element politically was his assurance to these leaders that if re-elected, his administration would actively oppose any Israeli annexation of the West Bank.
That's a major statement, potentially shifting traditional U.S. alignment.
It's certainly a strategic move designed to rebuild trust with key Arab states and position the U.S. as a potentially more even-handed broker in future negotiations, trying to regain credibility in the region.
Okay, let's shift the focus to Europe now, and the ongoing tensions between NATO and Russia. Airspace violations seem to be a constant flashpoint.
A very dangerous one. Tensions spiked immediately after reports surfaced of Russian fighter jets allegedly crossing into the airspace of both Estonia and Poland. Both are, of course, NATO members.
And the response from NATO leadership sounds tougher than usual.
Considerably tougher. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen made headlines by stating publicly that shooting down intruding Russian military aircraft is now an option on the table.
Wow. On the table. That's escalatory language.
Extremely. And it wasn't just her. U.S. President Trump echoed similar sentiments, suggesting a hardening consensus that these incursions demand a more forceful potential response.
Shooting down a Russian jet, even over NATO territory, would be a massive step. What's the thinking there? Is it just rhetoric or a genuine policy shift?
It's likely a combination. Russia's likely goal with these flights is to test NATO's air defense readiness, response times, maybe so division. They always deny the incursions, naturally.
Standard playbook.
Right. But when leaders like von der Leyen and Trump use language like on the table, it's primarily deterrent signaling. It's meant to tell Moscow, don't push too far, the risks for you have increased. But the actual act of shooting down a plane carries such immense risk of uncontrollable escalation, it's hard to imagine it being anything other than an absolute last resort.
A very high-stakes game of chicken. And it's not just happening over the Baltics, right? This military proximity extends elsewhere.
All the way up to the Arctic, yes. We saw another instance where U.S. fighter jets had to scramble to intercept Russian warplanes flying near the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone, the ADIZ.
The ADIZ isn't sovereign airspace, technically.
Correct, it's international airspace. But flying military aircraft that close triggers an automatic intercept response. It's standard procedure, but it underscores just how close these military forces are operating on a regular basis in strategically sensitive areas. Constant vigilance.
Now, also at the UNGA, President Trump made some waves with what seemed like a shift in his stance on the war in Ukraine.
This caught many analysts by surprise. In his address, Trump took a notably critical tone towards Russian President Vladimir Putin personally, and he labeled Russia itself a paper tiger that Ukraine could actually defeat if given the right tools.
A paper tiger. That's a sharp turn from some of his previous comments, which were often seen as more skeptical of deep U.S. involvement or Ukraine's chances.
Exactly. It contrasts sharply with past rhetoric. Now, some White House insiders are briefing that this shouldn't be seen as a permanent ideological shift.
Oh, what's the suggested strategy then?
The thinking, apparently, is that by adopting a more hawkish public stance now, criticizing Putin, talking up Ukraine's potential, it strengthens Trump's position for future negotiations. It allows him to approach Moscow later from what looks like a position of strength, potentially making him seem like the only one who can broker a deal.
So it's diplomatic maneuvering. Talking tough now to enable negotiation later.
That seems to be the interpretation circulating, a strategic play for leverage down the road.
Meanwhile, Russia isn't just focused on Ukraine. They're actively courting allies elsewhere, particularly in Africa.
Very actively. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held significant meetings with leaders from the Alliance of Sahel states, that's Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger.
Countries that have seen coups and pivoted away from France recently.
Precisely. These meetings were explicitly about strengthening political ties, defense cooperation, even cultural links. Russia is clearly capitalizing on anti-Western sentiment and security vacuums in the region to expand its own geopolitical influence across Africa, offering itself as an alternative partner.
Okay, let's pivot now to the world of technology, finance, and regulation. The AI arms race is absolutely defining the corporate landscape, and the money involved is just staggering.
Mind-boggling sums. Look at Oracle. They just executed a massive $10 billion bond sale. $10 billion.
And that's specifically for AI.
Explicitly. They stated the funds are to fuel aggressive investment in AI development and expanding their cloud infrastructure. This race isn't just about algorithms, it's fundamentally about capital expenditure, buying the GPUs, building the massive data centers needed to power AI.
Especially when you have huge clients demanding that power, like Meta Platforms who are big Oracle customers.
Exactly. And that massive need for capital and computing power is driving this incredibly complex dance of partnerships and competition among the big AI players. It's like a tech cold war with shifting alliances.
Give us some examples of these shifting alliances.
Okay, look at Databricks. They're committing $100 million to integrate OpenAI's models.
Okay.
But at the same time, they're also partnering with Anthropic, another major AI model developer.
Hedging their bets. Why do both?
Risk management, partly. Ensuring they aren't reliant on just one provider, but also specialization. Different models might be better for different enterprise tasks. They need access to the best tools wherever they come from.
Makes sense. And Microsoft is doing something similar.
Yep. Microsoft has a huge investment in OpenAI, obviously, but they're now also integrating Anthropic's models into their workplace assistant software, like Copilot. Again, diversifying their AI portfolio, ensuring they have options beyond just OpenAI.
And then there's the company actually making the hardware that powers all this, NVIDIA.
NVIDIA, the kingmaker, they're reportedly planning to inject up to $100 billion into OpenAI.
$100 billion just into OpenAI.
To help fund the absolutely massive data center expansion, OpenAI needs to keep scaling up its models. It shows you the symbiotic relationship NVIDIA needs OpenAI to drive demand for its chips, and OpenAI needs NVIDIA's hardware and cash to keep growing.
The scale is just hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
So with all this money flying around between giants, what about the startups? What are venture capitalists looking for from new AI companies right now, like at events such as TechCrunch Disrupt?
They want more than just a cool algorithm. The buzzword is defensibility.
Defensibility, meaning?
Meaning, how can the startup build a lasting competitive advantage, a moat? Innovation is great, VCs say, but in AI, new models pop up constantly. Just having a slightly better model today isn't enough because someone else might leapfrog you tomorrow.
So they need something sticky.
Exactly. Defensibility might come from having unique, massive data sets that are hard to replicate, or exclusive distribution channels, or strong network effects, where the product gets better the more people use it. They want a business model that can actually capture and hold value, not just temporary tech coolness.
Innovation is necessary, but not sufficient.
Got it. Okay, Shifting from software to hardware, there's a new challenge brewing in the PC chip market.
Yes, Qualcomm is making a very serious play here. They've announced new processors, the Snapdragon X2 Elite and Extreme.
Snapdragon is usually associated with phones, right?
Traditionally, yes, but these chips are specifically designed for Windows PCs. This is a direct challenge to the long-standing dominance of Intel and AMD in the laptop and desktop market.
Could this actually shake things up?
It could. If these Snapdragon chips deliver on their promises for performance and especially battery life for Windows laptops, it could significantly shift the market dynamics and offer consumers real alternatives. Okay, let's move into the realm of government policy and how it's intersecting with technology and resources. We're seeing the U.S. government taking actions that look a lot like resource nationalism.
That's exactly the term being used, and it's a significant development. The headline example is the Trump administration pushing to acquire a 10% equity stake in Lithium Americas.
Lithium Americas are developing that huge Thacker Pass lithium mine in Nevada, right?
Correct. This move is fascinating because it follows the previous Biden administration already providing a massive $2.26 billion loan for the same project.
So first a huge loan, now the government wants to be a part owner.
Why? It signals a fundamental bipartisan shift in U.S. industrial strategy. The government is no longer just facilitating, it's actively intervening in the market to secure domestic supply chains for critical minerals.
And lithium is absolutely critical for EV batteries, defense tech.
Critical. Taking an equity stake gives the government a direct say, potentially ensuring supply prioritization for U.S. needs. It's the kind of direct market intervention historically associated more with countries like China than the traditionally free market U.S. It shows that securing these supply chains is now seen as a paramount national security issue, overriding older economic orthodoxies.
Resource nationalism in action. Wow. Okay, another controversial policy involves visas for high-skilled workers coming to the U.S.
Yes, the H-1B visa program. There's a proposal on the table to hike the associated fees dramatically, potentially, by as much as $100,000 per visa in some cases.
$100,000, that sounds prohibitive.
It's drawn fierce criticism, particularly from the tech sector that relies heavily on H-1B workers. Prominent venture capitalist Mike Moritz famously called it a brutish extortion scheme.
Strong language. What's the fear?
The fear is brain drain. Critics like Moritz argue such a high cost will simply push highly skilled engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs to choose other countries like Canada or European nations that are actively recruiting talent. Why pay a fortune to come to the U.S. if you're welcomed elsewhere?
Is there economic analysis backing that up?
Yes. Economists at J.P. Morgan, for example, predicted this kind of fee hike could significantly reduce the number of H-1B work authorizations issued, perhaps by around 5,500 per month. That's a direct hit to the talent pool available to U.S. companies, especially in tech.
A potential own goal for innovation, then.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the UK seems to be struggling with big infrastructure projects.
Yeah, the saga of the high-speed rail link between Manchester and Liverpool continues. The government keeps postponing the final announcement and commitment.
And this is causing frustration locally.
Intense frustration. Leaders in the north of England see this rail line as absolutely vital for boosting the regional economy, improving connectivity, and helping to close the persistent economic gap between the north and the more prosperous south, particularly London. These repeated delays are becoming symbolic of perceived regional inequality and government indecision on major infrastructure investment.
All right, let's talk data, privacy, and the ever-present cyber risks. In Europe, that big new regulation, the DMA, is starting to bite.
It certainly seems to be. Apple is now publicly stating that the European Union's Digital Markets Act, or DMA, is causing delays for them.
The DMA is the one aimed at reining in the power of big tech gatekeepers.
That's the one. Apple says that having to re-engineer features in iOS and their other platforms to comply with the DMA's strict rules on interoperability, data sharing, and allowing alternative app stores, it's proving complex and time-consuming. So some new features might roll out later in the EU than elsewhere.
The cost of compliance hitting the product roadmap?
Exactly. It shows how regulation can have very direct impacts on consumers, even if the intent is to increase competition long-term.
And the cost of failing to manage digital risks could be astronomical. as a UK retailer recently discovered.
A brutal example. The UK retailer Co-op suffered a major cyber attack, and the estimated cost to the business was a staggering £206 million.
£200 million just from one attack. How?
Primarily lost sales, disruption to operations, recovery costs. It highlights just how vulnerable even large organizations are. The impact was so severe it apparently had knock-on effects. The government reportedly had to consider providing financial support to some key suppliers, including those serving automotive giants like Jaguar Land Rover, JLR, because the hit to Co-op's revenue threatened stability down the supply chain.
Wow. A cyber attack on a retailer potentially needing government intervention to stabilize car manufacturing suppliers. It shows how interconnected the economy is.
And how devastating cyber threats can be.
Okay, on a much, much lighter note, a small win for internet users everywhere.
Slight chuckle. Yes, finally. A tiny victory for digital quality of life. YouTube has apparently listened to years of complaints. Those annoying end-screen recommendation pop-ups, you know, the ones that cover the last crucial seconds of the video you're trying to watch?
Oh, yes. Infuriating.
They're now allowing users to hide them. It's a small change, but honestly, a deeply satisfying one for anyone who's ever yelled at their screen.
Sometimes it's the little things. Chuckles. Okay, for our final section, let's delve into societal dynamics, accountability, and how official stories are increasingly being questioned. There's been huge public skepticism around the official narrative in the Charlie Kirk shooting case.
Yes, this case has really become a focal point for public distrust in official narratives. The arrest of the suspect, Tyler Robinson, was meant to resolve the case, but instead it seems to have fueled a massive wave of online debate and doubt.
What are the main points of contention?
Critics point to what they see as a lack of transparent forensic evidence being released publicly. Specifically, questions linger about the autopsy findings, the analysis of the bullet, anything definitively linking the suspect to the weapon and the victim in a way that satisfies public scrutiny.
And the type of weapon itself is a major sticking point, isn't it?
It really is. The official reports mentioned a .30-06 Mauser rifle. That's a powerful, large-caliber hunting rifle.
Right.
Online commentators and prominent figures like Candace Owens, who have amplified these doubts, argue that the injuries reported don't seem consistent with such a high-caliber weapon. They suggest the damage would likely be different or more severe.
So that discrepancy feeds the narrative that maybe the official story isn't the full story, or is somehow inaccurate.
Exactly. Whether valid or not, that specific detail about the rifle has become a key piece of evidence for those who distrust the official law enforcement account. It taps into a much broader societal trend of skepticism towards institutional narratives.
A skepticism sometimes fueled by other tragic, politically charged events, like the shooting near the Dallas ICE facility.
A deeply disturbing incident. A sniper attack near the Dallas Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility resulted in the death of one detainee inside before the gunman apparently took his own life.
And the motivation seemed explicitly political.
Tragically clear, according to reports, officials stated the gunman had inscribed anti-ICE messages directly onto the ammunition he used. It underscores the volatile intersection of political rhetoric and real-world violence targeting government agencies.
And speaking of authorities, there's a concerning report out of the UK about police overreach regarding journalists.
Yes, this report raises serious press freedom concerns. It found 21 documented instances between 2011 and 2024 where UK police forces unlawfully used covert surveillance powers to access journalists' phone records.
Unlawfully? What were they trying to do?
Their goal, reportedly, was to identify the journalists' confidential sources within the police force itself, basically, trying to find whistleblowers or leakers.
That's a direct attack on source protection, which is fundamental to investigative journalism.
Absolutely. It's essential for holding power accountable. Using state surveillance powers to hunt down internal sources sending information to the press is a major red line for democratic accountability.
And finally, in the category of unusual official scrutiny, President Trump made a rather strange claim about his experience at the UNGA.
Quite unusual, yes. President Trump publicly alleged that he was subjected to triple sabotage during his speech.
Triple sabotage? What did he claim happened?
He cited 3 specific technical issues: a malfunctioning teleprompter, an escalator that apparently stopped working when he needed it, and problems with the sound system during his address.
And he believes this was intentional.
He framed them as potentially deliberate acts designed to disrupt him, calling them sinister events. He even formally requested a Secret Service investigation into these technical glitches. It definitely plays into that broader narrative of facing opposition from hidden forces or institutional friction.
All right, let's touch on health, specifically where high-profile endorsements and public misinformation can create genuine risks. There's a situation around autism.
Yes, two related issues here causing concern in the medical community. First, President Trump recently endorsed leucovorin as a potential treatment for autism.
Leucovorin, isn't that used in cancer treatment?
Primarily, yes. It helps counteract the side effects of certain chemotherapy drugs. There's no robust scientific evidence supporting it as an effective treatment for autism itself, so this endorsement of an unproven therapy raised eyebrows among medical professionals.
Okay, that's one issue. What's the other?
The other is a widespread fear among some pregnant women about taking Tylenol or acetaminophen. There's persistent misinformation circulating online linking Tylenol use during pregnancy to an increased risk of autism in the child.
And this link is unproven.
Completely unproven by rigorous scientific study, but the fear is pervasive.
And the danger is that women might avoid necessary medication.
That's the major concern for doctors. They worry that pregnant women suffering from fever or significant pain might avoid Tylenol because of this unfounded fear. The medical consensus is clear. Untreated high fever or severe pain during pregnancy poses known, significant risks to both the mother and the developing fetus, risks that far outweigh the speculative, unproven link to autism.
So the misinformation itself is creating a tangible health risk.
A very real one. Doctors are really struggling to counter this effectively with evidence-based advice.
And finally, a stark example of public health services under strain, this time in the UK regarding essential equipment for children.
A genuine crisis unfolding. Thousands of disabled children across the UK are facing incredibly long waiting lists, months, sometimes longer, just to get assessed for and receive essential wheelchairs.
Wheelchairs. Basic mobility equipment.
Basic, essential mobility equipment. The demand is overwhelming the system, and resources are chronically insufficient. It's gotten so bad that at least one major charity that provides specialist wheelchair services has had to temporarily close its doors to new referrals because they simply cannot cope with the backlog.
That leaves families in an impossible situation.
Absolutely desperate. Without the right equipment, these children face enormous barriers to education, social life, basic independence, and dignity. It's a failure of provision for some of the most vulnerable.
Wow. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. I mean, from the microscopic finding out that fat inside brain cells might drive Alzheimer's and that bacteria influence our sleep, all the way to the geopolitical and industrial scale. The U.S. government buying stakes in lithium mines, drone warfare escalating over the Red Sea, intense diplomacy at the UN.
It really spans the full spectrum. And if you try to pull that thread through all these disparate stories, what really stands out, I think, is this intensifying battle over sovereignty.
Sovereignty in different forms.
Exactly. National sovereignty, obviously contested airspace, border security, control over critical resources like lithium, but also cognitive sovereignty are our own biological processes like sleep, truly ours, if they're influenced by bacteria. And digital sovereignty, who controls our data. How do regulations like the DMA shape the technology we can access?
So almost every major story touches on who controls what and where those boundaries lie.
And how those boundaries are being challenged, redrawn, or defended. It feels like the defining feature of this moment, a global contest over control at every level.
That's a powerful summary, and it leads perfectly into our final provocative thought for you, our listeners, to mull over. Given the scientific evidence suggesting our most fundamental internal states, like sleep, are influenced by the bacteria living inside us, and the geopolitical reality that national policies, from mining strategies to visa rules, are increasingly driven by external pressures like global supply chains, where do you personally draw the line between internal sovereignty and external influence? In this incredibly interconnected world, what does self-determination, whether personal or national, truly mean anymore?
That is definitely something to chew on, a deep question for a deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
I'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.